How y'all doing this morning?
Great. Doing well.
I was asked to give y'all a quick rundown on some disease and weed control in raising corn, and just kind of give you a little quick rundown. Some of the common corn diseases that we see in the Mississippi Delta are your common rust, southern corn rust, southern corn leaf blight, northern corn leaf blight, gray leaf spot, and occasionally we'll have some diplodia leaf streak, hocus leaf spot, and have various ear rots that we see occasionally. I'm just going to touch on a couple of these. First one, of course, that we see the most are your common and southern corn rust. Your common, little quick facts about them is your common rust is going to like your cooler temperatures around that 65 to 75, high humidity, and wet conditions. It is wind blown. It's more of a dark brick cinnamon color, as you can kind of see in that picture there. It's usually found on both sides of the leaves compared to southern corn rust that's usually just on the top of your leaf surface. As you can see, the difference in your southern corn rust is typically late in the growing season. It's a lighter orange in color and will usually have a yellow, the lesion will have a yellow halo around it. It's more of a higher heat, which is going to be more 75, 85 degrees, and the high humidity. And like I said, it can be found on the whole plant instead of mainly just in spots like your common rust. There's a side-by-side picture of it taken by Tom Allen. You can kind of see the more dark brick cinnamon on the left being your common when those pustules break open, compared to your southern corn rust there on the right, more of that light orange color. Some of your scouting and management of the disease. Southern corn rust is going to be a late season disease. It's going to come in, it's more subtropic, come in on the wind currents from Mexico, South America. You may see it more prevalent on pivot, that it's going to give it that rainfall. So it's going, when those pustules break open, you'll see it scattered across more of the field. As far as the management of it, southern corn rust is, like I said, a late season disease. So best recommendation, plant early. If you plant later in the year after wheat, if you have a double crop, then yes, you're probably going to have to do something about it. A couple things to look at is your stage of corn. If you're around tassel and you're starting to pick up rust, then you need to intensify your scouting. If you get closer to dough and you're not that much, or you're getting closer to dent, more than likely you can outrun it. It takes a lot to affect yield on it. There are limited hybrids on the resistance. Most of all are somewhat susceptible, but and fungicide, usually on all our diseases, we try to make that be a last resort. So that's kind of just a quick rundown of the southern corn rust management. Northern corn leaf blight is another one that we hear a lot about. It's more of a cigar tan shape, and the lesions can be 1 to 6 inches. You can have 1 to multiple lesions per leaf. It's going to be your moderate temperatures of that 65 to 75 degree temperature. It likes wet, high humidity conditions, and you find it more in continuous corn productions. If you, about 2 weeks around V10, V14, 2 weeks prior to tasseling, you want to intensify that scouting, 1 to 2 leaves below the ear. If you're starting to pick it up, you may want to look at it. Some of the management hybrids do a very good job. Like I said, you're going to see it more in continuous corn, so managing your residue, rotating a year out of corn, helps a lot. Like I said, on the fungicide, there's really not a threshold for northern corn leaf blight. If you're picking it up around tassel, it takes a lot. You're looking at probably 5%, roughly on 50% of the leaves at tassel to justify a fungicide. Like I said though, it likes 65 to 75 degree temperature. In the Delta, we're hot, so if it's 85, 90 degrees, let Mother Nature take care of it. It may sit there for several weeks and you not have to do anything about it. And that's normally what happens with the northern corn leaf blight that we see. Gray leaf spot is another one we see. It's also still, most all these diseases are in this continuous corn, planting corn after corn, reduced tillage. We don't, in the fields that I check, being that we're fire irrigated, we're eliminating a lot of these diseases like this because we do a lot of tillage work so we can fire irrigate. So it takes care of a lot of these, but we still do occasionally see them. Gray leaf spot's pretty easy to recognize. When the lesions get over there, they'll run parallel sides on the ends and they'll be interveinal. They won't go across those major veins that you'll see in other, like southern corn leaf blight. It will progress from the lower part of the plant to the up toward the top part of the plant, splashing off your residue on the ground. So, like I said, biggest thing is there is a little hybrid selection. Manage your residue, do tillage work, and you can control this one fairly easy. And then if it comes down to it, where if you plant a susceptible variety in your corn after corn, you start seeing that 5% on 50% of your leaves around that tassel, you may need a shot there and may need another one around milk stage if you're continually getting it. But pretty much the same thing on all these is your tillage and hybrid selection will control a good portion of these diseases that we see. Southern corn leaf blight is another one. It's similar to the gray leaf spot. Like I said, it's more irregular. It will cross the veins. This one, the breeders have done a really good job on getting resistance to it, and we hadn't seen much need of spraying for it or seeing it very often. The hybrid selection, like I said, is probably your best control for southern corn leaf blight, and I couldn't tell you last time we really had a outbreak of it. But those are some of the main ones that we normally come across in the Mississippi Delta. A little bit about weed control in raising corn. I'm going to touch on 2 or 3 of the main ones that we have. The biggest one that I think that we have is Italian ryegrass. It's a winter annual erect that grows 2 or 3 foot tall. It's going to germinate in early fall through spring. At least 70 counties that I know of last year in Mississippi have glyphosate resistance. And it's showing to at least 5 different herbicide mode of actions resistance, whether it be your ALS and your other ones. So it's something to deal with. It is something, it's if you don't control it, you're gonna have problems. A little bit in corn, I found a thing that showed that research showed that left untreated, that it can take yield potential of corn down 80%. I've seen some, I think it's 100%. Needs to be controlled at least 3 to 4 weeks prior to planting corn. If you try to control it 2 weeks prior to corn and it's still a little stubble out there, you can still lose up to 20% of your yield potential, and that's a lot. Jason Bond and them have done a really good job on doing the research on this, and they've pretty much boiled it down to this is a 2-pass program if you have it regardless. The best one has been the residual in the fall, followed by a spring or winter application. I'll show you a little slide on that in a minute. Using the correct, if you decide to wait till the spring and you want to use your paraquat, you got to get the right tips and nozzle selection. The AI tips and a little bit of water is not going to cut it. Scouting is critical. Knowing if you have it emerged or not in the fall. You can go out there and double disc, and that's part of the recommendation. When you go out there and double disc and you want to use a fall residual burn down, but you're going to wait for a rainfall, well, you wait 10 or 12 days after you disc it, do it. Well, you may have a lot of seedlings coming up that you may need to add some paraquat to it or something like that. So scouting is critical also. This is pretty much the way they like to look at it, is a fall applied, winter applied, or spring applied. And like I said, it's a 2-pass program, so whether you do a fall followed by a winter or spring, or a winter followed by a spring or a spring, it's either way you look at it, you're pretty much going to have a 2-pass program on this Italian ryegrass to get it under control. And this is the slide that they've come up with that they like to, have seemed to be doing the best of, whether it's your S-metachlor in the fall being put down, followed by a spring application of your paraquat to clean up anything. If you don't do anything in the fall, you come in the winter, you put out Select, Clethodim or something, make sure that you do know that there's a 30-day plant back restriction on it. But like I said though, you got to, it's all timing to me, because if you wait before you plant, it's still, like I said, you got to have that 3 to 4 week prior control before you plant. So you'd like to see that select go out mid-January, mid-February, and then about 2 weeks later, around the 1st of March, come in there and make sure that you get it, clean up anything with any more paraquat that you might need. Other big one for us, well, let's see. There's some pictures. Like that on the left, that's your 80% yield reduction, if not more. That on the right, you're going to have a lot. If you got a fair amount of that scattered throughout your field, you're going to see some yield reduction. I mean, when that corn gets up 3-4 foot tall and you walk out there, that corn's going to be about a foot tall. It's a very competitive weed. It's something that doesn't need to be taken very lightly. That's a picture of Tommy Eubank. That's where I say the 100%. You know, that's more than that 80% to me right there. So, and you see a lot of that riding these roads. You see a lot of it just keeping these roadsides clean, keeping these ditch banks clean. Other big one that we seem to have the most trouble with is pomeraniac, pigweed, palmer pigweed, careless weed, whatever you like to call it. This is a very invasive and aggressive weed. The problem is that it germinates over a very long period of time. Once that soil temperature reaches about 60, till first frost, it's going to be germinating all year long. It's also a very glyphosate, you know, various different modes of action, herbicide resistance. Scouting is also critical in it, because if you don't get it before it's 2 to 3 inches tall, you can hang it up. The timing, application, weed size, get it while it's small if you can. I put temperature in there, and on the corn, the way we look at some of this is most people are planting their corn when it's 50, 55 degrees. Well, a lot of your Palmer amaranth is not going to germinate until it's 60. So on the soil temperature side of it, if you're going to use a one-pass program, say it be your Lexar or something like that, I try to get folks to hold off just a little bit until they know those temperatures, because I don't want to lose a week or two of residual if that soil temperature is not correct for those plants to be germinating. So we can get a little extra longer residual there by watching the soil temperature. The good thing about corn is that you've got different modes of actions that you can use compared to what we do in cotton and beans. You've got, you know, you can use your atrazines, you got your other bleachers, you've got glufosinate, which is your ignite. So you've got a lot more options in the corn, and that's why it's a good rotation to help control on your Palmer amaranth. Same thing, spray coverage and nozzle selection. I think one of the biggest things that we probably overlook is post-harvest control. You have a lot of guys that go out there and harvest their corn and go disc that stubble one time and leave it for the fall. And what happens? You ride by and there's pigweeds everywhere. The key to all this is reducing that seed in that soil bank. So if you go out there and you've put out all these chemicals and residuals and you've done a great job of controlling that seed in that seed bank for that year, and then you go disc it, and then you let it grow up from August to first frost, you haven't done anything. So a lot of people, whether it flail shred it and just kind of give it a mulch layer across there, if you plan to disc it, spray it. Whether you got to spray it 2 times, 3 times with paraquat or whatever it is, not knowing what you're going to plant next year. So it's the post-harvest control, I think, is just as critical as the rest of it. Last one, well, let's see. There's just a thing that you can get off the state webpage as far as you can see the different modes of actions that we have to use in corn. From a standpoint of chemicals, you got a lot more, like I said, than you do in your cotton or your soybeans. So it is a good rotation. Last one I'm just going to touch on is horseweed, mare's tail. It's a winter annual. It germinates in the fall and early spring, and I swear I think this year is as long as I've ever seen it grow. Yeah, I mean, it was through late summer. It just never gave up. It's more prominent in these reduced no-till situations. It's also glyphosate resistant. It's even got a little paraquat resistance, they say. I hadn't seen that, but it's one of those, just like weed size, it needs to be controlled early. If you're double disking in the fall for your Italian ryegrass, usually tillage will take care of a good bit of this. You also have 2,4-D Roundup in your ignite in the spring, being in corn. You also have two more options to get it, but you better get it as the rosette stage when it's 4 to 6 inches, because when it starts bolting, you're probably not gonna do it. Now, it's not nearly as competitive as the previous two weeds, but it is a problem that we have resistance to. So I think with that, one thing I tell most of my guys, you can either start clean or start over. And with that, that's all I've got.
Any questions for Lauren?
Question on the temperature, it's a good point, you know, to watch the soil temperature on the farmer. Where do you really target to try to let it get 60 degrees then go?
Well, you kind of target, well, you got to also go look at your corn size too, because you know you're going to have a 12-inch on your atrazine, in which most people are going to be going after that too. So you try to target it, you look for it. If you see it starting to rise, you can say, all right, well, we know. So, but you also want to kind of time it with that 12-inch. And it's just, it's not something you necessarily go by. It's something, you know, that you also look at to help control it. So you're just trying to say, well, all I'm trying to do is be able to push my residual. I don't want to put it out too early and lose that 7 to 10. Sometimes it could be 2 weeks. You know, the soil temperature makes, I've seen corn germinate and it just sit there. It'll turn back cold. So you don't want to go out there with that one pass program and lose 1 day to 2 weeks or even more. So, but yeah, you can kind of look at it and kind of see, but I wouldn't wait till they emerge, but if you know it's getting close, then it'd be, go with it. Thank y'all.
No more questions for Lauren?